Welcome back. So how many youngsters are being arrested locally? In Sarasota County, the number of arrests has dropped by 35% in the past 5 years. In Manatee, that number has dropped by 32%. The number of kids being put into diversion programs has also gone down. In Sarasota, only 173 kids were offered a diversion program last year, while Manatee had 451 kids diverted. So is juvenile crime down, or do the numbers speak to something going on bigger? Here to help us make sense of it and discuss how citations fit into the equation is State Representative Joe Gruters, who co-sponsored and introduced the current legislation. Mary Dougherty Slapp, Vice President of Teen Court of Sarasota, and Judge Lee Hayworth, who serves on Florida's Supreme Court Committee on Children and Families and is a senior circuit judge assigned as liaison on the school justice and delinquency issues. I mean, you can't have a better panel here, and I want to tell you how much we appreciate you coming in. And Joe, let me start with you and ask you, what are you trying to accomplish here?
Well, basically, the biggest goal I think that everybody has in Tallahassee is to try to come up with a solution so these children that are making mistakes when they're growing up in our communities don't get branded for life and end up being penalized, either trying to get a job, trying to go to the military. And so trying to create a system. In Sarasota County, they've done a great job with teen court. I actually volunteered as a teen court attorney back when I was in high school, and it's a great program, but not all parts of the state are like Sarasota. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure there's some type of uniform entity to make sure that all children across the state are being treated equally and have the same chance that like what teen court provides or what these civil citations will provide, and that's really a second chance at life and making sure that they get the second opportunity.
I want to ask you this, and I want the both of you also to respond to this, and that was part of the comments in Adam's story with the comment that you know, the teen court program is a good program. Civil citations are great, but there is concern that there is paperwork involved with that, and that police officers may be more apt just not to want to do that because of the time it takes, and either not charge the youngster or not give them a civil citation and go on to something else.
Teen court was always a tool for law enforcement, and a young person could be diverted directly to teen court, saving them any record in any system other than perhaps an incident report. So there was no record that followed them into their future. It was always a tool for law enforcement. What we would ultimately like to see is that law enforcement has that tool back, so they have the discretion to warn and release, depending on the child, the incident, their interaction, a direct referral to teen court, which could give them that first chance for that first mistake. And if they're not getting the message, then maybe a civil citation that actually puts them in the system with juvenile justice.
So you're saying go to teen court first before a civil citation would be offered? And
that would offer an opportunity for an assessment of the young person and the family. You know, you'd be surprised how many young people are actually picked up for shoplifting, let's say, and then drug tested, and lo and behold, they're actually also smoking marijuana and need more intensive services.
Your Honor, does that make sense to you?
It does, and I think what her suggestion is that there's an assumption that maybe law enforcement is being bogged down with having to prepare the paperwork. So one of the alternatives that she's proposing, as I understand it, is to skip over that process and have the law enforcement folks just directly refer these youth directly to the teen court program without any paperwork involved on their part, saving them that trouble, giving them the option of deciding to do the paperwork with a civil citation or what she's calling—
Or at least minimal paperwork.
Right, or a direct referral, which is a lot logistically easier.
But let me ask all of you to respond to something that Florida's Department of Juvenile Justice Secretary Christy Daly said, and she said that civil citations would actually save dollars because those kids are not going into a more costly court system.
Well, let me say that the legislature, and I'm very glad to see them accepting the premise that we need to do things to keep kids out of the system, keep their footprints out of the juvenile justice system, focus more on rehabilitation than punishment. And having said that, the civil citation program is successful in doing that. It does keep kids out of that. Christine Daly will tell you that there's a Chinese firewall between the reports that come in under a civil citation and those which come in under a prosecutorial petition.
Joe, just want to give you the last word. We have a couple of seconds left.
Well, you talk about cost savings. The civil citation, what they say is it costs $385 to process a kid through the civil citation process, and it costs nearly $5,000 to put them through the juvenile court system. Yes. So that's a huge savings. Think about the thousands of kids that are arrested. So that's a huge cost savings for the taxpayers.
We are just getting started. Our discussion of criminal justice for juveniles continues in a moment, right after our check on our forecast. Stay with us. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we are discussing the criminal justice system for our kids and why there is a push in the legislature to issue more civil citations instead of making arrests. Our guest tonight, our State Representative Joe Gruters, Mary Doherty-Slapp of Teen Court's Board of Directors, and Judge Lee Hayworth, who oversees juvenile crimes for both the Florida Supreme Court and the 12th Judicial Circuit. And Joe, let me ask you to respond to something that Mary said earlier. She said that Teen Court should come first, and then if that's not effective, then issue a civil citation.
Well, my response to that is whatever is going to work for the children of our community to make sure they get that second chance. The big thing is offering a diversion program, whether it be teen court, civil citation. We just want to make sure, like that individual who started off that your 7 o'clock segment, for him not to get a job because he was arrested for some type of shoplifting deal or battery or whatever it was, nonviolent offender. These guys need a second chance. We need to create whatever opportunities we need to do as a community. Sarasota does a pretty good job right now. There's some kids fall through the cracks, but really Sarasota is not the issue. The issue is other parts of the state, and what we need that uniform type law, and we need to make sure we include programs like the Sarasota Teen Court in there to make sure that we give these kids every opportunity to succeed later on in life.
There has been some pushback in the legislature that I was reading about. In fact, Jeff Brandes, who is from Pinellas County, just up the road, voted against it at one point, partly based upon the inclusion of battery in the legislation. He also says that the civil citations might be fine, but they should be for children or teenagers no older than 14 years old. I'm wondering, Your Honor, what you think about that.
Well, I think that there's children of other ages. We don't always have Opie in Mayberry here. We got some kids who come from very dysfunctional families that are younger than 14. But the objections that I've heard from law enforcement primarily have to do with the mandatory nature of the proposed bills. In other words, the law enforcement that I've spoken with want to retain their discretion to refer cases to civil citation, and this new law that's being proposed, they say, deprives them of that discretion, which it sounds good to have every case sent to civil citation, but if you happen to catch the ringleader of a drug ring or a shoplifting ring who's never been in trouble before, he or she likely has more problems than would be useful for a civil citation program.
Joe, respond to that. Or
go ahead, Mary.
Well, I was just going to say that the bill as it is now gives law enforcement two options: to warn and release or issue a civil citation. We'd like to respect the officer's discretion and give them additional tools by also allowing for teen court.
Joe.
And I do agree, given the officer discretion. Certainly, again, you look at Sarasota County, we probably have the best sheriff in the country with Sheriff Tom Knight, just an absolute fabulous individual. His officers are well trained here in Sarasota County. So what we need to do is give the officers the option, but at the end of the day, we need to make sure that that our children, we don't brand these kids who make one mistake for the rest of their lives that will prevent them later on from going to the military and from serving in different capacities of employment here in our community.
A lot of people who are watching this might ask, where is the line? In fact, there was some comment in Adam's story about how many crimes can a teenager offend and still be, eligible for civil citation or even teen court.
Well, right now, a young person gets 3 civil citations. So the two people you had on your earlier segment, Katie McBrayer and Stephan Campagna, their stories would not be possible under the current system. Every child is unique. When you think about it, every family, every child, every issue you're dealing with is unique. That's why we feel that early assessment part, the holistic assessment of both the young person and the family, is so important to really assess and see what their needs are and make sure we're adequately meeting those.
Your Honor, could there be circumstances that a youngster offends more than 3 or 4 times. It takes them a while, just like, you know, we're all different, but they would get it in the end, but you have to have a little bit more room than 3 strikes, you're out.
Well, I think they have that now. Under the current law, the state attorney has discretion to file regardless of whether there's a citation or not. In other words, they can decide to overrule a referral of civil citation and charge this individual anyway. So the gatekeeper really is the state attorney's office that makes the fundamental decision whether it's appropriate for this kid to go into civil citation or not, regardless of what the initial referral is.
Joe, where are you in the process? Obviously, you're moving it along in the House, but where does it stand in the Senate?
Well, it's actually interesting because we got together earlier and we were communicating with Senator Flores, who's the Senate sponsor, and I was mentioning to her what a great job the teen court here in Sarasota County does in trying to come up with some type of solution that will work statewide, but also acknowledge the job that some of the communities do already for our children. And my guess is these are going to move forward. I think they have pretty wide range support. So now the job is trying to make sure that we can either amend the bills or try to work with the sponsors, to continue to work with the main bill sponsors to make sure that the language that we finally vote on the floor is what all of us want in all of our communities.
Well, just so we know, how many teen courts are there around the state? I mean, we're set here, but
there are actually 55 teen courts throughout the state. Out of 67 counties, they're functioning in 55 counties, but they do all function differently. So, for example, Sarasota, which has been the model both nationally and internationally, functions as a not-for-profit. So the cost you mentioned earlier about how much it costs to put a young person through a civil citation program is a similar amount to put a young person through teen court, except operating as a not-for-profit, we actually end up saving the county and the taxpayers money.
In fact, Your Honor, you also heard in Adam's story, there was some criticism that there are not enough diversion programs out there, whether outside of Sarasota, maybe in neighboring counties or elsewhere, that we need more programs like this and not less.
The more programs we can have that divert children out of the criminal justice system is certainly something we should all support. In the case of teen court, they struggle to get the money that's necessary to run the program. And I know they have fundraising efforts, et cetera, but they struggle every day to be able to meet the demands, and I admire their tenacity in getting the funds that they do. But the bottom line is these families have got to pay something when they come in. They don't always get it for free, although they do a lot of free work. The ones that can pay ought to, and referrals there, they do charge. I forget how much you're charging for it.
We do charge, but we waive 95% of those fees at teen court.
Well, I mean, so is civil citations the only answer to this problem? Is it incumbent on the state to add some money to these programs so it is, you're getting the best of both worlds? Well,
there's no question. And obviously, funding now, we have a pretty flat budget. But listen, this is an investment in our community, because eventually we need people to be productive citizens so they could be contributors, and so that's why investing in these prevention efforts and these diversion type programs make a lot of sense at the state level. And I think that you'll continue to see the Republican House and Senate and our governor work towards the focus of cutting costs, providing more opportunities and funds for these diversionary programs, because it's at the end of the day, everybody wins. The state wins, the community wins, the children wins, the family wins, and if they continue to be bad, then they're going to eventually go through that juvenile justice system and they'll be dealt with.
Your Honor, while we still have the time, what are the drawbacks of the system that we have right now in terms of whether it's the teen court or the civil citations that we're dealing with?
The drawbacks now are that the program always suffers under a lack of funding. Department of Juvenile Justice is severely underfunded, in my opinion. They've lost personnel. They don't have the probation officers they've always had in the past. And so, because of the reduction in crime statewide, you've noticed, you said 35%. So they attrition accordingly. But the children that we do have problems with are more problematic. You're talking about heroin dealers, you're talking about violence, gangs, and all that sort of thing. And really we need skilled people. The biggest problem I see is really a funding one.
Right. And some of those numbers were actually Sarasota and Manatee that we were talking about. Why don't we take a quick break, and when we return, we'll have final thoughts from our guests. Plus, spring training games start this weekend. Find out how some of our viewers are feeling about the impact of the Orioles on Sarasota. Welcome back. Is it time to rethink the way we punish juveniles who commit crimes? Is there a way to avoid saddling them with records that will just follow them for the rest of their life? Our guests join us right now for final thoughts. Civil citations, Joe, make the case.
Well, I'm glad I'm able to co-sponsor this great bill. You know, when I first was elected, Shore reached out to me, explained the program to me, explained the need, and I signed up to be this co-sponsor. And I think that we could continue to make the bill better, to include good programs like Sarasota Teen Court. By the end of the day, the civil citations are good for communities. They only deal with nonviolent offenders. They're not it's not a slap on the wrist. The kids have to make restitution to their victims. They have to go through a rehabilitation process. It saves the state money. You go, like I said, $5,000 is the cost if you want to put a kid through the juvenile court system. $385 if you put them through a civil citation. So ultimately, everybody's a winner. The community wins, and the state wins, and the children win.
Mary, is the biggest obstacle what comes first?
The main focus, not necessarily an obstacle, is that we all want to do what's best for the youth in the community. We want to decriminalize being a juvenile in Florida, and everybody's heart's in the right place. It's a matter of how do we get that done. So when my friend Representative Gruters talks about the process that young people are going through a civil citation, Teen Court currently serves as the civil citation service provider. So we are handling the civil citation cases, but it's the opportunity to also have them come through Teen Court as a direct referral and not have any record anywhere in the juvenile justice system, that we would want to add to that and have every kid that deserves an opportunity to be treated as a kid happen in our community.
Is that not happening right now, Your Honor?
I think it is, and I want to make the point that civil citation is just one part of the initiative that's statewide to try to break what we call the school to prison pipeline. We know that when kids get a criminal history, we know when they're suspended or expelled from schools, their potential for being adult criminals is enhanced. So there's initiatives like civil citation. We have a project going now at Sarasota High School with the school board designed to be a diversionary program also as a pilot project. It's a major focus of the courts. It can't work without community service, the legislature, and the other stakeholders getting involved with it.
All right, thank you all. But before we go, we want to share with you what some of our viewers are saying about last night's topic, the impact of the Baltimore Orioles. According to Visit Sarasota County, the team brings economic impact of nearly $89 million each year. Beyond having their spring training here, the Orioles partner with local schools and nonprofits to do education and fundraising. We asked you what you thought about having the team in our town. And Dan Gravitsky writes, fake economic impact, sales taxes are just money that would have been spent at local bars, restaurants, etc. Hotels and vacation rentals are full regardless, so any bed tax money is minimal. Claudia Marie Russo writes, love the Baltimore Orioles. And Perry Neurath writes, the stadium sits empty most of the year. Why can't they bring the minor league team in for a year-round baseball? Well, if you'd like to join the conversation about tonight's topic, just visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/news@7. And FYI, on the Watch Pass Roundtable discussions, they're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. Thanks to our guests for being here tonight. Joe Gruters is the state representative for Sarasota. Mary Doherty-Slap is the vice president for Teen Court of Sarasota. And Judge Lee Hayworth serves as on the floor of the Supreme Court's Committee on Children and Families. He is a senior circuit judge assigned as a liaison on the school justice and delinquency issues.